Hi, my name is Aisha Marable, and I'd like to welcome you to MLK and Beyond, a celebration of the words and the spirit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in music, in dance, in poetry, in the recitation of his speeches, and in the new thinking about his work and the legacy and what that means to us today. The New Jersey Performing Arts Center in Newark, New Jersey celebrates Black history, Black music, Black art, Black culture every day. The Art Center's commitment to honoring diversity is a central tenet to its mission. That commitment is reflected in its programming, arts education initiatives, and community events. We hope you enjoy these performances inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King, enduring message of hope, of determination, of love, and most especially, the necessity of justice.
Dr. King once noted, "Our world is a neighborhood. We are tied together in a single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, and whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." The coronavirus pandemic, also known as COVID-19, has shown us that indeed our world is a neighborhood and has heightened the awareness of our common humanity. Caring for others and looking out for each other has become the thread used to ensure survival and life. The pandemic has also starkly revealed the inequities in healthcare, economics, housing, labor, and education that consistently plague this country. NAACP Newark, New Jersey, established in 1914, remains committed to relentless and unapologetic advocacy. We have the courage to stand as a testament of hope, striding toward a better, more just society for all. Regarding civic engagement, Dr. King also noted, "One of the most basic weapons in the fight for social justice will be the cumulative political power of the Negro. I can foresee the Negro vote becoming consistently the decisive vote in national elections." While he said that over 30 years ago, his words live today. If we look on the general election of 2020, the foundation of the United States and its democracy was saved by Black voters. That statement is not to suggest that other voting groups have no power. However, despite desperate attempts to disenfranchise, marginalize, and discredit Black voters, we came out in record numbers around the country to cast our votes during a pandemic. And to punctuate our significance and power, Black voters turned the color of the state of Georgia with the first Black man voted to the United States Senate since the Reconstruction era. We showed that civic participation activates our power. Let's remember the recurring theme of Dr. King's words and work: love. The road to regeneration is love. Love will always trump hate. Love will unite. Love and light will prevail over hatred and darkness. Let's exercise our love for freedom by being responsible to each other and holding each other accountable for our communal actions. Let's be the love that bears a sweet fruit of equity and justice for our families and community.
Brittany Lacey, 17, resilient, dynamic, friend, sister, and daughter. Don't take my life away.
Tiana Jackson, 18, intelligent, graceful, tenacious, future teacher. Don't take my life away.
Brianna LaFalez, 19, tenacious, independent, resilient, future physical therapist with a sports medicine specialization. Don't take my life away.
I'm happy to join with you today.
I'm tired of my black men and my black women being shot.
What will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
Get up, stand up, get up, stand up, get on it. Yes, I'm no longer who you thought this one would be. Yeah, up here on the mountain that I climbed to lose you. I said every bit of business that business could work through. Ask me, but all my wisdom departed. Tell me, but all my wisdom departed. But oh, please at least answer me this. Answer me, what's the distance? Yeah, don't take my life away. Don't take my life away from a distance. Yeah, don't take my life away. Don't take my life away. I'm addicted. Yeah, don't take my life away. Don't take my life away. I'm addicted. Yeah, don't take my life away. Don't take my life away. Don't take my life away.
In 1967, before a small audience at a church, Dr. Martin Luther King reflected on the meaning of freedom after slavery. Black people had worked for 243 years for nothing. When emancipation came, black people got freedom to hunger, freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom and famine at the same time, he said. Government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only that, King went on, did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm. And they are the very people telling the black man he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. This is what we are faced with, and this is a reality now when we come to Washington with this campaign, and we are coming to get our check, Dr. King noted. It has taken 50 years of research and writing to regain the clarity with which Dr. King understood and described the scale and scope of systemic racism in America near the end of his life. Because as we stand at the precipice of the possibility of a new America, and politicians debate how to move forward in the midst of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and its devastating toll on Black, Indigenous, and Brown lives, the question of redistribution of wealth and resources are front and center in American politics. The question of whether there will be a Green New Deal and Medicare for all is being defined less as a choice between the many people who will live and the many people who will die, as it should be, but falsely as a choice between capitalism and socialism. When King talked about coming to Washington to get a check, he wasn't just sloganeering. He was deadly serious. To him, it was a matter of life or death. He clearly understood that Black lives had subsidized white lives, from slavery to freedom. The labor of Black people had underwritten the wealth of white America. In his own words, depressed living standards for Negroes are a structural part of the economic system in the United States. A week before he died, Dr. King told a New York Times reporter, "In a sense, you could say we are engaged in the class struggle, for our program calls for a redistribution of economic power." King understood that because of the New Deal with its redlining housing policies and last hired, first fired jobs program for Black folks, that most white Americans didn't get to buy a home or finance a college education because of the free market capitalist system. They did it because of socialistic mortgage subsidies and guarantees to both white borrowers and white builders. To this day, white Americans on average have 10 times the net worth of Black Americans, but the primary instrument of wealth creation for the typical white American wasn't capitalism, but socialism. 1/4 of white Americans own land today because of the Federal Homestead Act, which gave them land directly at very cheap prices, not based on a market economy managed by private actors, but based on a massive social program managed by the government. The same land, which, by the way, was stolen by violence and conquest from indigenous communities. This was the kind of redistribution that built the middle-class homes that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates grew up in. Resources that came from the whites-only federally subsidized loans that gave them the first venture capital they needed to harness their creative visions. Most elderly white Americans today depend on Medicare, exactly the kind of race-based socialism that's good for some, but not for all.
as I look far past open sea, the path that comes to carry me will take me high as from earth to stars. Love carried me from where I'm from and brought me into where we are. She carried me from where I'm from and brought me into where we are. It may be hard to see the light. You may get weary through the night, but there is one thing I know for sure, that love carried me from where I'm from and brought me into where we are. She carried me from where I'm from and brought me into where we are. I see a threshold, beloved. We've reached a crossroad, vast, uncertain of the past, but born into the universe, informed with love. We build forward into a beautiful future, knowing that all of our actions from the past has determined our present, showing that all of our actions right now will determine our future. A social call was given, an encouragement for you to free your mind through love and liberation. Yeah. So download this information. Do what you can. Eat from your land. Own your own land. Be kind to your hands. And love brought us into where we are. And we've gotten this far to go as far as the stars and beyond. She carried me from where I'm from and brought me into where we are. If you only look, you'll see a path that brings you misery. But if you search your heart and soul, love will carry you from where you're from Love carried me from where I'm from and brought me into where we are. She carried me from where we're from and brought me into where we are. Love carried me from where we're from and brought me into where we are.
The reason the right has been fighting so hard for 40 years, leading to the lunacy of the last 4 years to dismantle and then destroy government, is not because government failed at creating wealth and opportunity for many white Americans, but because it did it too well. The half century before Reagan, the government used high progressive taxes on wealthy whites to redistribute to low-income and middle-income whites. What an irony that many people evoke King's legacy today as a reason for believing more capitalism will save black people. A thing-oriented society, King described, where you are the thing, cannot fix itself. If anything, black people have been the most subjected to the vagaries of free market capitalism without any of the protections that American socialism gave to white Americans. Remember the Great Recession? Big banks, too big to fail, and more recently with meth, heroin, and opioid epidemics, white drug addicts and criminals, too many to jail. Black people went from being private property to being exploited by private interests in the convict leasing system, to being liberated by civil rights legislation to compete in a capitalist race rigged from the start. But King repeatedly called for a restructuring of the whole of American society. And contrary to popular myth, King didn't expand his vision of justice by figuring out that racism was baked into capitalism at the end of his life. Before he even moved to Montgomery, Alabama, in a love letter to Coretta Scott, his future wife, in 1952, he wrote this: "I'm not a conventional Baptist minister. I believe in the social gospel. It's not enough to save souls. We need to change society so the soul will have a chance. My father," he noted, "was a thoroughgoing capitalist, but I don't want to own a lot, and ignoring people's need is wrong. I'm much more socialistic in my economic theory than capitalistic. Capitalism has outlived its usefulness. It takes the necessities from the masses to give luxuries to the classes. I believe in the naturalization of industry, a warless world, and better distribution of wealth, a brotherhood that transcends race or color. I believe that is the gospel we need for the world," King wrote in 1952. It also reminds me of something King said later, and that is that philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice, which make philanthropy necessary. King could never have imagined the crisis of police brutality or mass incarceration as the harvest of the civil rights movement. After King's death, the historian Liz Hinton has found that there were black uprisings in 125 cities. And between 1968 and 1972, at least 960 segregated black communities witnessed 2,310 separate incidents of civil unrest or uprisings. Unlike this summer, however, these were young black people on their own without the cover of a sea of white bodies. Unlike this summer, when these young black people first challenged Democratic mayors and governors and a president in Lyndon Baines Johnson, they were met by every tool of repression from local cops to National Guardsmen, as well as their elected representatives from state legislators to congressmen passing the first laws by the federal government to criminalize black protest and resistance, to define black poverty as pathological, and to divert resources from schools to cages. 2 months after King was assassinated, a Democratic-led Congress passed Lyndon Baines Johnson's Safe Streets Act of 1968, which put an unprecedented $330 million of federal investment in militarizing local police forces, arming law enforcement with surplus weapons and counterinsurgency methods from the jungles of Vietnam. For 50 years, both parties responded to the murder of Dr. King and the outrage of young Black people across the nation who were protesting the precarities and insecurities of a society built to extract and exploit them by building more jails and prisons than any place in the world. By a long shot, the United States is the world's leading jailer, and no aspect of national life, from the economy to education to electoral politics, has been untouched by the scale and scope of racialized policing and punishment. It is an $80 billion system that drains resources from the public goods that build healthy and secure lives, from education to healthcare. It is deeply rooted in the white supremacist and capitalist logics of containment and extraction. It is also a massive jobs program for mostly white police and prison guards across the nation. The Kerner Commission found this when it studied it up close in 1967 and noted that what white Americans have never fully understood, what the Negro can never forget, is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto, white institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it.
My color speaks before I say a word. It tells a story that lived long before I was born. The melanin in my skin has traveled the world and seen places I've never been. It has witnessed beauty and suffered pain. It has been loved and it has been scorned. It has been beaten, yet remained resilient and strong. It is the thread that unites a powerful people and weaves a lineage. My color is undeniable and it is rich. It is courage and victory. It is the complexion of survival.
We have waited for more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. The nations of Asia and Africa are moving with jet-like speed toward the goal of their political independence, and we still creep at horse and buggy pace toward the gaining of a cup of coffee at a lunch counter. I guess it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your brothers and sisters at whim, when you have seen the hate-filled policemen curse, kick, brutalize, and even kill your black brothers and sisters with impunity, when you have seen the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see the tears welling up in her little eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed for colored children, and see the clouds of inferiority begin to develop in her little mental sky, and see her begin to distort her little personality by unconsciously developing a bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking in agonizing pathos, "Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean?" When you have to take a cross-country drive in your automobile and you have to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept a black person. When you are haunted day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored. When your first name becomes nigga and your middle name becomes boy, and however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your mothers and wives are never given the respected title Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly on tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and plagued within the fears and outer resentments. When you are fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and those men are no longer willing to be plunged in an abyss of injustice where they experience the bleakness of corroding despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Whoa, glory, glory, glory. Now the war is not over, victory is not won, and we'll fight on to the finish. Then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, Salvation now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, his power was the people. Enemies lethal when king became regal. Saw the fishes Jim Crow under a bald eagle. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had epiphany. Now the right from wrongs in history. No one can win the war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Whoa, glory, glory, glory. Whoa, glory, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Whoa, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Whoa, glory.
I don't know about you, but I know I don't teach my children false information or a sense of false pride or false hope. We need to be real about the country we live in order to change it. I teach them that racism is the problem, not race, that implicit bias is the accumulation of explicit bias. Children are taught by words, by deeds, by silence, and of course by what they see and hear. Dr. King said in a July 30th speech in Charleston, South Carolina in 1967, "I can't limit my concerns to the particular situation where a Negro comes and says, 'I'm the first this.' I'm more concerned about the seconds and the thirds and the fourths." King did not use his own success story of hard work, an exceptional education, a PhD at 23, the youngest pastor ever of Dexter Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He did not sit at the table of power of 4 presidents, Nixon, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson, and then turn to black youth and say, "I got mine, you get yours." He knew that but for the grace of God, he had walked out of the valley of despair time and time again. He knew, like the songwriter and first black NAACP President James Weldon Johnson, that history was a source of power and not of shame, something to be remembered and not to be denied. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have won, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. He knew, like Marion King, a freedom fighter in Albany, Georgia, who worked alongside young SNCC activists Charles and Shirley Sherrod, teenagers at the time, that it was the young people that needed our wisdom and nourishment, but most importantly, our support, as they mobilized to do the restructuring of the whole of American society. We can celebrate King today and year after year and treat him as a saint and martyr. We can whitewash his legacy in such a way to sanctify the myth of American exceptionalism, that only in America can a black man rise up out of the red clay of Georgia and single-handedly change America and the world. This is a myth because, of course, King did not do this alone. He learned time and time again that individuals don't bend the moral arc of the universe by themselves. Communities do. People together with common purpose and vision do. People like you.
Badeuyo angana yere fa nyani ede badenuyo jonti yere fa la dunu yasigi mamo jonti yere fa nyani sie adama de nyasigi kagele kani yere fa sa bimogo yasigi mamo jonti yere fa nyani ni nyomo na udankaba e barazor odununya ni keriba sagoye kaba enindonindo odununya ni kerifa sagoye kaba e barazor odununya ga imani yere faga nyami nyekide numbila nyana finjugu la ubumine kufologo toko sunguruba muso dentewa jongani yere faganyani nyani te bajama yere faganyani jongani yere faganyani mbade uyo angana yere faganyani yede mbade nuyo jonti yere fagala Nikeri basagoye kaba enindo dunuya Nikeri fasagoye kaba bara soro dunuya ga imani yere faga nyani nyekide numbila nyana pinjugula ubumine kufologo toko sunguruba muso dendewa jongani yere faga nyani nyani te bajama Jonti yere fagala Madame Sise Kodo Kani yere faga toroya Ibali malu jigiye Kani yere faga sa Iwolo de umbife Kani yere faga nyani siye Sise bife Kani yere faga sa Imani yere faga nyani Ka aumbela nyana finjugu ubumine kufologo toko sunguruba muso dente wayebe jongani yere fa nyani nyani te banjama jongani yere fa Seidu yo kani yere fa nyani Seidu kan kodo kani yere fa sa Madina ala ere Seidu kodo kani yere faga toroya libere ville Seidu kani yere faga sa imani yere faga nyani nyekide numbila nyana finjugula ubumine ufologo toko kamelemba koro dente wa Seidu jongani yere faga nyani nyani te bajama Kani yere faga sa Sise batife Kani yere faga nyani Ibali maujigiye Kani yere faga sa Iwolo de umbife Kani yere faga nyani tiye Mali yenu jigibika Kani yere faga nyani Amadu kan bife Kani yere faga nyani de tɛ aw ma mɛn wa ne ma yɛrɛ faga abada u y'a da ne la u ye diɲɛ jɔ kojugu bɛɛ da ne la ne